Wow. Wow. Well, first of all, I want to thank Lucinda and Sam for inviting me to chair this very important session. And why is it important? Because it's about our children, it's about their future. And their future lies in books. Why do I say that? Because I know from my own experience, when I was a little boy in Liverpool growing up, libraries were really important to me. Because you had books at home, we had books in the library. That's where I found my books. And I remember just a small thing. The word Stephen always reminds me of my childhood, because I'd never heard that word pronounced. I only saw it in books. And whenever I say Stephen, I say Stephen. Stephen, because that's how I saw it. Books, we need books. And so what that says to me today is we need to read to our children. We need to read books. We need to read to our children, and they need to read books themselves. I got to start off with a quote from the Book Trust, which I think is really important. It talks about children's books act as a mirror to reflect the reader's own lives, but also as windows so readers can learn about and understand and appreciate the lives of others. Appreciate the lives of others. It makes us think there's more than us in the world. That's why books are important. And you're never too young to start. So that's why I'm excited about being on this panel. And we've got a great panel in terms of, we've got a librarian, we've got a publisher, we've got a real mix of people who are involved in the industry. And I want to introduce themselves. So perhaps Lucinda, you could kick off and introduce yourself.
Yes, that's great. So I was just letting Sonya in, who is our final panelist, who has made it, which is great. I'm Lucinda. I'm the children's librarian at Balham Library in London, which is one of Wandsworth libraries. I'm really excited to be on this panel today, talking to Samantha and Sonya and Michael, because this is basically the reason why I'm a librarian. I'm here because I think all kids deserve to see themselves and to see other experiences in the stories they read. And I think everyone should have access to those stories. And so I'm really, really, really just genuinely honored and excited to be allowed to be in this space with you all. Thank you so much for letting me talk as well as other people. And thank you so much for being involved.
Sonya, do you want to say who you are?
Yeah, I'm Sonya McGilchrist. I'm the founder of Dinosaur Books. We're a very small publisher of children's books for ages 5 to 12. And, we're passionate about inclusion and diversity.
And Sam?
My name is Samantha. I'm from Book Love, which is a multicultural travelling book carnival. And we pull together all the multicultural and culturally diverse content that we could find in the world, books in all languages, all representation. We pull them together and we take them on the road, literally into schools, offices, playgrounds, festivals, markets, museums, anywhere we can pop up. And we've got the online shop as well, which is thisisbooklove.com. And I'm also an activist and campaigning for more multicultural books in schools and nurseries up to university level with our GoFundMe, where we've raised money and we are continuing to raise money so that we can give free books away that are multicultural. And that's going to be happening in 2021 while we work out how we're going to do that.
That's great. So I'd like to kick the session off by asking a kind of a general question about the why we see this subject of books for Black and brown children. Why are they so important to have books targeted for them? So, Lucinda, perhaps you could you could tell us why you see this important. We should have these books, as I say, for Black and brown children.
So, I mean, obviously, I am coming at this from a slightly different perspective, because when I grew up, if I walked into a library, I could see a lot of kids that looked like me. Every book on the shelves pretty much would have a small girl and her brother, and the small girl would have blonde hair and blue eyes, which, my hair's green right now, but same applies. And they got to have all these wonderful magical adventures. And it never occurred to me that this was not a thing that other children got to experience until I was a bit older. And when I was a bit older, I realized some more things about myself. and that actually my experiences weren't in all the books that I was reading. But that was sort of the tipping point for me realizing that actually the childhood I enjoyed, where I was letting books shape me and mold me into the person I was going to be, where I believed that stories were changing my world on a daily basis and that I could be the hero of any adventure, that was not a thing that other kids were getting, which made me very angry. And so I thought I'd better do my best to try and mediate that as much as possible. I'm a librarian now because I want to try and make sure everyone has access to seeing themselves in stories, and also that everyone has. Radine Sims Bishop, I think, is the book trust article, or the person that was being quoted in the book trust article. And she said all children deserve windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And yeah.
So you see, so Lindsay, you see it's important that children should see themselves. So Sonya, do you share that? Is that important for you as a publisher, that you should produce books that the children see themselves in? Is that part of your thinking?
Yeah, I think as a publisher, sorry, I don't think you can see the video of me, but never mind.
Yeah, it's a real shame.
Yes. Yeah, I'll try and fix it for the next time you come back to me. But for now, as a publisher and, you know, as a Black woman, I just think it's really important that children are able to see themselves in the books that they read, because books help children. Books help everybody, but children particularly. It shapes your worldview when you're a child. You go to books to escape and to find out about the world and to find out about other worlds. And if you don't see yourself represented in those books, you don't know that you have agency, that you're a person with agency, that you could be at the center of the story, that you could be a hero. And I just don't think that's good for children's confidence if they never see themselves in a book having adventures and being important. So for me, that's why it's really critical that Black and brown children get to see themselves in books.
Sample, what as a bookseller at the kind of the sharp end, do you see? Does that make sense from your experience that kids need to see themselves? The parents talk about that. It's good that my child sees themselves in the book. They ask you for books with them in. Is this part of? You see this?
Yeah, it's such a humongous subject, and you could spend hours discussing it. From a customer point of view, so I'm wearing my book selling hat now. When customers come to me, sometimes they are so prescriptive in what they're asking for. I want a book with a boy who is half Japanese and half Jamaican. I want this boy to have a relationship with his grandmother and be really good at schoolwork and be involved in adventures with his friends. Now, and the reason that happens is because there are huge numbers of people who feel completely neglected from storytelling, because, like as Lucinda was saying, most characters in the books are blonde and blue-eyed. So if you are half Japanese, or you're half Japanese Jamaican, Nigerian, St. Lucian, what have you, you just don't see yourself in a book. And there have been many stories told from and by people who have walked this path before me, specifically someone who comes to mind straight away called Verna Wilkins, who was very involved and very passionate in the 80s with regards to making multicultural books more accessible. I think she's spoken publicly about what inspired her to start writing books and forming her publishing company in the 80s, when she said her son came home from school and had a work project to do. Her son was Black, and he drew a picture of himself as a white child. And when his mum said, "Why are you doing that?" he said, "Because Black children aren't in books." And that was his exercise, was to draw some kind of self-portrait or a book that was about himself, but he drew a white child. But we react quite strongly to something like that. But this is happening every day. This is completely normal. Sadly, it's a problem that I come across all the time with parents and carers who come to us for books because they say that their children who are black or brown, mixed race, are depicting themselves as white in their own stories.
Wow. Well, I can, that chimes with me so much. And I didn't realize when I was coming up, but my day was Jack and Jill and Enid Blyton, and it was normalized. So it's like you didn't see yourself there. That was normal. So I fully understand. And it saddened me that it's still to this day. So look, we've established these books are important. There's a real need for these books. So what are the challenges in making them happen? Why aren't these books happening? Why aren't these books, hundreds of these books being published today? What's stopping these things happening? Sonya, as a publisher, in some ways, you're at the sharp end of this. Why aren't we having kind of a flood of books? Because there seems to be a great demand. These books are important.
I think, I mean, I'm relatively new to the publishing industry. I've been doing this for sort of 4 or 5 years now. But what people tell me is, and what I read is that, and actually it's in the statistics as well, is that the publishing industry is very white. And I think it's something like sort of almost 6% of senior managers in the publishing industry are white. So obviously, and that's a kind of legacy, that's how the publishing industry has always been. And so the commissioning editors are commissioning books about people who look like them, from people who look like them. And that's just the way it's been for sort of decades and decades. And I think until that changes, we won't see lots of different books with diverse characters coming through, at least not from the big publishing companies.
So Lucinda, as a librarian, what Sonya's saying is there's not many books. So does that mean you've got to make the best of them? You've got to get all that you can onto your shelves. How would you work with that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. And one thing that I'm always aware of is looking at the amount of books being published with main characters who are black or brown by writers who are black, who are people of color. That's a tiny, tiny, tiny drop in a huge pond of children's books. And it's really easy because of that for it to get overlooked and for people to not get all the books. And that means you have to work twice as hard. You have to seek out independent, like smaller independent publishers, independent booksellers like Sam, find different ways of working with other people. Because if you just rely on the bestseller lists on the normal library supplier websites, you're going to be getting a tiny, tiny amount of books, a tiny amount of the already small amount that's out there. And it just shrinks it down and down again.
So Sam, you're at the sharp end of this, selling these books. You know, how do you get a pipeline? How do you develop the business if there's not enough books out there to make a business? You know, so what do you do in order to make your business happen? Because it seems quite challenging.
Again, another big topic. Yeah, it's hugely challenging and it's really demoralizing. But what you have to do is you have to be creative and you have to be resourceful. And I remember when I read that statistic about the 1%, which was a study. We all know about this 1%, and if you don't, there's a lot of information out there about it. Where
Sam, perhaps you should give some background to that 1% with the research that Book Trust did.
Okay, so the 1% is the results of a study that had been carried out in the last couple of years, I think in 2018 or 2017, by the CLPE, which is the Centre for Learning and Primary Education. And they did a lot of research, and the research showed that I think in the previous year, I mean, Lucinda, feel free to jump in if I'm not getting this right, but in the previous year, they looked at all the books that had been published in the UK for children, and 1% of those books had a black or brown child as the main protagonist and on the front cover. So but then there was another statistic which was slightly better by 3%. The statistic was that the other result was that there were 4% of books published in that year who included a child of colour, but not as the main protagonist, as an incidental character. So we kind of are looking more at the 1%, really. How is it that in 2017, 2018, 2019, we're not in 1940, we're in a year where the population, the multicultural and diverse population, is growing rapidly. And even if it isn't growing, according to the naysayers, who perhaps don't want to cater to this rapidly growing population of Black and brown folk, wonderful, you still have a lot of white children who are being deprived of a well-rounded, good education when it comes to cultural diversity. So the problems are huge. And I remember when I read about this 1%, I wasn't surprised, but I almost had a strange reaction to it, because in my world, it didn't feel like a 1%. Because going back to your original question, Michael, about the challenges, I was sourcing all of my books from self-published writers who were all Black and Asian and brown, writing by night and working in normal jobs by day, because we as a community knew that we could not rely on the white establishment to give us the content that we wanted. So we picked up the pens and we started writing for ourselves. And I think there's something absolutely beautiful and empowering about that process. And that is why when I saw this 1%, it didn't really resonate, because a lot of the books that I sold were self-published books. It was only when I started looking at selling published books and I started to write to every single publisher out there and ask them to send me their catalogues, that I was very quickly going through their catalogues within 2 seconds to actually find the books with the Black characters. And I was like, this is why I went the self-published route, because they were in abundance.
Thanks for that, Sam. I'd like to spend a few moments talking a bit more about this 1%, because that means I sense from you guys there's a demand there. There's a demand. Now, but I don't sense from you that you're overworked, you're flooded with offers. It's a really dynamic business. Is it who's pushing who to create this demand? Is it the children? Is it the parents? Is it you? Oh, help me here understand the demand of this market. And I'd like to start with you, Sonya. Is this 1%? Does it need to be made bigger? Is there demand for these books, or is it something that there's no real demand for them? It's going to remain at the 1% because that's all that's needed.
I think there's definitely a demand for these books, and I think there's a demand for books that show Black, brown, and Asian children doing a wide variety of things. There's a demand for books in every genre and in all genres of children's books. I think that survey that Sam was talking about also showed that the most of the books that had non-white children in them were about social issues, and that's fantastic. But also we need sci-fi and fantasy and comedy books where the main character is non-white as well in children's books. I think that parents, and speaking as a parent myself, they're crying out for this. They just want to be able to see their children as they see them, as fully rounded human beings that can go into lots of different spheres and do lots of different things and can be happy and sad and superheroes and all the rest of it. So I think the demand is most definitely there. And I think the publishing industry now, in the last kind of year or two, has recognised, it is beginning to recognise definitely that the demand is there, and beginning to publish more authors of colour, and gradually beginning to take on more diverse illustrators as well. But it's going to take time to feed through. And one of my concerns about it is that it's going to take time to feed through, but also that I'm really worried that it will be a trend. And that it's a marketing-driven trend because it's fashionable at the moment, and that when it's not fashionable anymore, we won't see these books coming through again.
That's a great point you made there, Sonia, in terms of its fashion now. Black Lives Matter. And so it's on the headline. And there was recently, you saw with Hakim Adi's book, the history of African and Caribbean people in England. It was out, Hachette children's books. It was out of print.
Yeah.
And they had no plans to reprint it until actively through Twitter, email, social media, there was a campaign. And guess what? They're reprinting. In fact, I ordered, my copies should have arrived yesterday. So you're right. Okay, it's great they've done that, but to your point, Sonia, we've got to keep. Maybe this is just a fashion. So Lucinda, well, how do you respond as a librarian? Can libraries respond to fashion? Is there demand for black books right now?
I think there is a demand, which is quite encouraging to me, because it's really nice to see the books that I've been buying, people are actually wanting to read. That's very exciting. But I also think there is, in the publishing industry in general, a push towards more representative, more diverse, more inclusive books. It feels easy to think of it as just being a trend, but the We Need Diverse Books campaign started in 2012, I think. It's still going strong, and it's still influencing the way that the publishing industry is working, particularly in America, but also over here. And so I think it's mostly going to be a case for librarians of keeping the pressure on, keeping buying the books, keeping looking for the books and sourcing the books, and trying to get them to the kids. Because a lot of the time, sorry, you wanted to jump in?
No, go.
Okay. A lot of the time, it's really easy to give everyone what they think they come in wanting. People think they come in and they want to read David Williams, and that's great. It's getting them reading, it's a lot of fun. But if you can also push them towards Planet Omar, if you can push them towards Little Bad Man, all of those things as well, then you can get them reading books with characters who live like them, like their friends. Start bringing in books that maybe don't get the big push that, a famous comedian writing books would get.
Oh, that's fantastic. You sound like a bookseller there in terms of promoting. You like this, then how about this? Because Sam, isn't that your pitch, Sam? You're kind of broadening the market. If you like this, then how about that?
Yeah, I think I have a lovely position in that the people who come to my shop already know what they're going to get. Do you know what I mean? So it's a great filter. So they come to me already knowing what we serve. A bit like McDonald's, KFC. Like, they're coming to me because they want the Planet Omars and they want the multicultural books. So it's never a hard sell. I don't have to. But I heard you mention Hakim Adi's book, his new book. I know it's an old book, but it's been reprinted.
It's been published.
And you said you received your copy. So I just want to...
I haven't received it. They told me it's been delivered. It was just reprinted on Friday. I'm not at home. I'm traveling. So
that's okay. But I wanted to draw attention to that book, and it's a very important book. And we also have just started selling that book. So I just wanted to just plug that slightly. If anyone in the audience wants to buy that book, we're buying it from Book Love today. Sorry, shameless plug. But on a serious note, I think I'm quite concerned about that book and how hard Hakim had to work to get that book reprinted. And did it take Black Lives Matter for publishers to think, all right, let's reprint that book? Whereas 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, the book was out of print. What's happened is slightly concerning for many reasons, slightly sinister as well. And just speaking about the nature of the business and the selling, yes, you made a good point about Black Lives Matter. And my bookshop, thisisbooklove.com, saw a massive vertical jump in May and June. July slightly dropped off again in August. So Sonia's point about a trend worries me incredibly about the trends and about the is this sustainable, and do people really care, or is it a fantastic marketing ploy to jump on the back of Black Lives Matter that publishers are using because it's easy? It's easy. It really very, very upsetting if it is a trend.
That's interesting you see it as a trend, and there's a downbeat there. Who's buying these books? Are the black families, white families, general families? Because if you look at the books, the bestsellers on Amazon now, Afua Hirsch is up there, Akala's there. So black books are really right now are hot. Now,
listen, in my local Tesco's, you can buy Why I Know to White People About Race.
Which is fantastic.
Tesco's. £4. So I shouldn't be plugging that, but I'm not happy about it. You know, this is what's happening. These books have become flavour of the month, and people are buying them at a record rate to pile up on their coffee table. But are they reading them?
Okay, you actually raise a bigger point there, and I'll step outside the Black history or the black book. Most books are not read. Most books are bought and put on the shelf. The statistics are quite frightening in terms of it's over 80% are bought, but not less than 20% actually read beginning to end. So, but at least they've read the opening though, the first chapter. So it's a good thing they bought it and they're aware of it. So in some ways, you can see them as these as kind of leading books that introducing people, that making them aware of the topic. But Sonya, you know, are you as kind of sanguine as Sam in terms of this is a passing phase? Because publishing is a long-term thing. You don't publish a book in a day and a week. It takes a couple of months to publish a book. So you have to take a longer view.
I think I'm worried, like Sam, that it's a trend, and I think the only way that it won't be a passing phase is, as I said, if the publishing industry is more diverse. So that means publishers, the people who produce the books, but it also means the people who market the books. And also, I mean, Sam's book club is fantastic. Please buy all your books from book club. But
I'm feeling you, Sonya.
Yes. The thing, I mean, sorry, just to kind of, while I'm saying book club is fantastic, the reason why what Sam does is so fantastic, one of the reasons is that she is supporting all the people like myself, like the micro publishers, like the self-published authors who she said at the beginning were picking up their pens and doing the writing because the big publishers weren't doing it. And I think if librarians, for example, and schools can support Sam, then she can support us, and that's part of the ecology of the whole publishing environment. And that's what will stop it from being a passing trend, because we're committed, and Sam's committed, and Lucinda is committed. So I think that's something that's very important. The other thing that's very important is that we need diversity amongst other booksellers. We need people in Waterstones who aren't white and who are from other cultures and other backgrounds, and at the bookselling level and at the head office level. And we need that in all the booksellers, because these shops are very influential about how people find out about books. People just wandering down the high street and popping into their local bookshop, and they cannot choose a book from an author that presents them with a different point of view or a different point of view on history if it's not presented to them. And those, in a way, reaching those people is very, very important. Sam gets the people who already know that they want an alternative point of view and they want to broaden their horizons, or perhaps they're a black or brown family and they want to give their children some books where they can see themselves reflected. But we need to get the other people too.
No, Sonya, I think you're on the money there. I remember my mum used to say, "It's good to see your face." So I remember the first time I saw the Black Librarian. It wasn't until I was in my 30s, and it was hello, a Black Librarian. But I'm not saying it's normal yet, but it's increasingly getting Black librarians. And to your point, Sonya, maybe there's not enough Black booksellers in bookshops.
No, there aren't. I mean, we need more. We definitely need more.
I'm going to say, Sam, you want to make a point?
Yeah, I'm waving my hand. I'm being really patient.
The floor is yours. The floor is yours.
It's Zoom etiquette. It's waiting for your colleague to finish when we all want to speak together, but we have to, like, you know, practice self-control, which I'm really bad at. But look, I hear what you're all saying. I hear what Sonia's saying. And Michael, you're a fantastic chair because you're being very diplomatic. However, I do not want to see more books like this in Waterstones. And I'll tell you why. I'm a huge believer in the Black Pound. I'm a huge believer in owning our content. I'm a huge believer in, for any of you out there who can do some research on the Black Wall Street.
That's a good point, good point.
So I don't really care for Waterstones or any of these other bookshops. I love them. I'm not going to rubbish them, but from a political standpoint, from someone who sees themselves as, you know, sort of, you know, pro-African Black economics, I want to see this content in more Black-owned bookshops, not really looking at the Amazons and the Waterstones. So my, I suppose, agenda is not about trying to get more of these books into the Waterstones. I want to see us selling them. So people are having to come to us to get them. So your copy of African Caribbean Communities, Hakeem Addy's book, where did you buy your book, Michael? Just curious, no judgment. I'm just...
Of course I bought from Amazon. I'm a Amazon Prime.
Well, you know, we sell it.
Click and collect. No, you're right. No, it's about convenience and immediacy. You know, there's some other books I've bought from Black owners, but, you know, it concerns me you take that approach. Let me tell you why. And this is addressed to Lucinda and librarians. When I go into the library and I see the Black book section, and you have to think, what's that? It's not quite apartheid, but you want to say, well, look, why aren't the books around the place? You know, they're integrated into the libraries. So that's okay, this is a personal view. I'm more comfortable with the books spread around throughout the library rather than having, you know, this is our section. Lucinda, am I being too precious there? Do we need a Black section?
I think it sort of depends on the context. So in a lot of places, I say probably not. I don't have a Black section in my children's library at all. But I know Battersea Library has a really strong African library within it that was set up in the 80s. And it's really important to the community that stays there as well. So sometimes it's a case of working out whether it feels like it's tokenism to have this section and, yeah, a form of segregation, or whether keeping this as a space which has been argued for and fought for and which people have really committed to building is actually a really important link with the community and a really big part of why the library works in the way it does. And I think it can go both ways. Generally, I'm not like a big fan of having separate sections for identities. I really like doing book lists. I really like doing displays, but like I haven't got a separate shelf, which is my LGBT shelf. I haven't got a separate collection of shelves, which are my Black Voices shelves. They're intermingled, so people can find them while they're finding other things. But it's also really useful to have places where people can find them. So that's why we need lists. That's why we need displays, things like that.
I think you made a good point there. Now, I'm aware time's not our friend, so I want to just move off into perhaps a less contentious issue. The idea of illustrators. Because I see these books, and books are a source of aesthetic appeal, artistic appeal, good-looking books, fun to use books, fun to read books. And many great artists of color, have made the way, started their career in children's publishing. So what's your experience, or equally, how important is the illustrations in books? So Sonya, as a book publisher, you're at the kind of the sharp end, because publishers artists, illustrators are an additional cost. You know, are they something worth paying for? Do you value them?
I do value illustrators, but we don't. I had to make a decision at the beginning of when I was setting my company up not to actually publish picture books. which is obviously where you get the most illustrations, because basically I couldn't afford to, because not so much the pay of the illustrators, but in fact the printing costs of publishing colour books were just beyond me as a small publisher. So we have focused on what we call chapter books, which is kind of age 5 and 6 upwards, and there may be drawings in them. There are drawings in some of them, but they're not the books that you think of with the beautiful pictures in them.
What about your covers? Do you put any money into the covers?
Yes, yeah, we do. So we have a cover designer, and we have a couple of illustrators who we use to illustrate our covers. But it's not really, I mean, obviously the covers are very important, so it's really annoying that I haven't got a camera.
I think Sam's got one of your books.
I'm showing it, Sonya. I'm showing Children of the Benin Kingdom and how beautiful it is.
Yeah. I mean, we've had lots of compliments on that cover, I'm pleased to say, and I'm very proud of it. I think it says what the book is. In terms of books for books about with black children as the kind of main characters, I think that what the statistics show is that a lot of those books are picture books. They're disproportionately picture books, with lovely illustrations of kind of young black children on them. But I think that needs to move through to the middle grade and the young adult now, and publishers need to be brave enough just to say, look, here's a black young person, and they're not a toddler, and they're on the front of the book, and they're fantastic, so come and buy this book.
Good point. Sam, what's your experience of how important are the pictures on a book? Do good pictures sell the book? A good cover sell the book?
I worry that I come across as the voice of doom and gloom, and I don't want to be. I think, as you put it, Michael, I'm at the sharp edge. I'm often bleeding daily because of that sharp edge. But I've complained to these big high street bookshops in the past when I have noticed that their shop windows only have books with white children on the front of them. So there's a very popular series of books called Little People for Big Dreams, which we also sell. And they are fantastic little history books about that big, and each one of them focuses on an influential person throughout history. So you've got them on Maya Angelou, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Harriet Tubman, Zaha Hadid, and then you also have Coco Chanel, and other white influences throughout history. They're predominantly white characters, but there are also black and Asian characters, and there's loads of them. And I used to walk by a lot of high street shops, and in their front windows they would only ever display the white ones, and the black ones or the Asian ones were nowhere to be seen. So when we're talking about front covers and access to books and illustrations and pictures, we often talk about the role of the publisher, and the role of the illustrator. But what we're also forgetting, a big part in this pipeline, this food chain, are the merchandisers in these bookshops, and how what they deem as a seller. Do they believe that if they put books with black children on the front in the windows, that it's going to attract or repel? And this is the philosophy and the mindset of the merchandising. Who decides what goes into that front window? So your question about the front cover is a very powerful tool by which to kind of speak to your audience very, very quickly. And some people will believe that if you put a child of colour on the front of a book, it won't sell because black people don't buy books. Apparently, that is the rhetoric. Black people don't read. This is what some of the arguments are that are being used to justify this stupidity.
So, Lucinda, in terms of the covers, are they important to you as a librarian? Do you put them face out? The ones that they find attractive, or
I try to, yeah. And I try and put the ones mostly with black and Asian characters face out. But again, we come to the part where there are less of them. It's interesting. I've actually, slight side note, but when we were talking about the Little People Big Dreams book, And I remember the fact that we have, I think, all of the books in the series in the library. And the ones that I cannot keep on the shelves are Maya Angelou, Jean-Michel Basquiat. They're the ones that are always gone. If I'm looking for Rosa Parks, I cannot find her anywhere. She's always out on loan. Amelia Earhart's just there on a shelf, but Rosa Parks is always out. And I think that is at least an encouraging thing, though not in any way the be-all and end-all. But yeah, no, I think covers are hugely important. I think there's definitely been a move towards more representative and illustrative covers. There was a point a few years ago where people weren't putting black faces on covers because they thought it didn't sell. And they seem to have stopped that now, which is great. So now we just need to have that to translate to displays in shop windows, to everything like that, just so that we keep pushing it over to the next level.
Okay, thanks, Lucinda. Now I'm aware time's not our friend now, so I've got a few quick fire questions I want to finish off with. The first one. I'll start with you, Lucinda. I'll put you on the spot. What do you think has been your biggest success in this area? The one thing you say, yes, that really worked.
I mean, I'm kind of running a festival right now.
Yay!
Yeah, well done. Well done. Okay, Sam. Yeah. What about yourself? What's one big thing you see?
Sorry?
What's the biggest success you've had? That was my most successful X. What's X? Is it book sales? Is it promotion of a particular book, a particular author, a particular event?
My biggest, my proudest moment?
You think, yes, I did that.
My proudest moment is survival.
I got that.
I'm still doing it.
Survival.
Like, seriously, it's that deep. Like, the fact that I'm still...
Okay, no, people like that. Sonya?
I think for us, it's that latest book that I was talking about, The Children of the Benin Kingdom. And that's because obviously we're very proud of the content of the book and the setting, the location of the book, the fact it's about Black history, but also because doing historical fiction is quite difficult for children, because if you want it, it's got to be realistic but exciting. But it's got to be correct and accurate within a historical context, and it's quite a hard line to tread, because you can't go off into fantasy or just have something exciting happening that wouldn't have happened at the time. But I think we've done it, so I'm really proud of it.
Well done, you. Okay, next question. If you could have one thing done differently that would make whatever you want to do much better, what would that one thing be? And I'll start with you, Sam.
Oh my God, I don't know.
Is it publishers making life easier for you?
My colleague just said it. Amazing. She said, what was it? Ban Amazon.
Okay. That's a good ban Amazon. Okay. Lucinda?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to come for big booksellers in a slightly different way as well. The websites that librarians use, they focus and they push the most popular, the ones which are being pushed by the publishers most, all of that. I think if the main websites had more books from small publishers focusing on community voices, Black voices in that way, then it would transform the way that the libraries work. Because I'm lucky. I am one of few children's librarians in the country, and that means I have the time to go and choose books. A lot of librarians just do supply and demand because they don't have the time, they don't have the budget. They don't have the budget for hours for people to go and spend time doing certified book ordering and specialist book ordering. So maybe there's two things. Maybe we should also fund libraries more.
More libraries. And Sonya?
I think it's kind of echoing really in a way what Sam and Lucinda have already said. I think librarians like Lucinda are amazing, and booksellers like Sam are amazing. and they support people like me. So funding libraries more, allowing librarians to choose from a more diverse range of supplies, whether that means that they get more funds, or they get the time to spend those funds and look around and really source from smaller publishers and smaller booksellers. And if they were just, that would mean that, you know, I would sell more books. So that, I think, as Sam said, it's not easy. So, you know, you kind of need the support.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot, right on the spot now. You've got one book.
Oh.
One book to say, you got to tell the audience, you must read this. What is that book? And I'll start with you, Lucinda.
Okay. I only have one book. Oh gosh. Okay. I think that everyone should read Pet by Akwe Azimi. It's amazing. It imagines a world where theoretically all the problems we have on a daily basis of oppression, racial injustice have all been dealt with. There aren't meant to be any monsters left, but there are always problems that need to be answered. There are always issues that need to be dealt with. And our main character, Jam, has to deal with the fact that evil isn't always black and white, and sometimes it hides where you least expect it. It's amazing.
Well, we're going to put a reading list at the end of this on. We're going to put it on chat. Instantly, if you've got some questions, you want to put them on the chat now. At the end, we're going to have time for a couple of questions.
Michael. It's one in the Q&A.
Okay. In the Q&A. You're using the Q&A. Put your questions in the Q&A. That'd be great. Sonia, and it can't be one of your own books.
Okay. Well,
no pressure.
In that case, it's going to be Cane Warriors by Alex Wheatle, which I'm reading at the moment. Reading for pleasure, you know, really good stories that children love to read is very, very important. So it's well written. If you've got a child over the age of 12, I would say they will love it first and foremost, whatever their background, because it's a great story. Very important. And my heritage is Jamaican, and it's about the Taki slave revolution in Jamaica. So it really speaks to me. But I think anyone will love it. It's just a great adventure story.
Cane Warriors. Okay, we'll get that on the list. And then finally, Sam, one book. The book you recommend. Oh,
can you read it?
I thought this is a children's book, but that's interesting.
Parents should read it to their children.
Okay.
This is a very important book. 100 Great Black Britons. Fantastic book. So I would recommend that. And also this one, Young, Gifted and Black.
Okay, Young, Gifted and Black.
52 black heroes throughout history with a Hall of Fame at the back. Each page dedicated to...
excellent. Wow, that looks fantastic. Yeah. That's new to me. Excellent. Thank you for that.
Good. Really, really good. And it contains people of colour from all over the world, not just Americans, which is often the complaint. We get a lot of African American history.
Only one book. I know it's difficult. It's difficult for you. I know. Okay, I'm going to cheat now and talk about two books.
Oh!
I'm the chairman. I can do that. No, seriously. David Olusogun, he's just done his big book, you know, Forgotten History, a huge book, 700 pages. Thank you. I was going to say, the parents, you can keep that on your shelf until you've got a copy. But the one you want to read is this one. It's very readable, and Sam's holding it up now. Okay, I bought mine from Amazon. Shame on me. You can get it. You can get it from Sam. It's excellent. It's very, very readable. No. We're talking about David Olusogun's book, Black and British, and I recommend this is something you can read out loud to your children. You can read for yourself, mum, dad, grandparents. Very readable, very accessible. I can't recommend it enough because I've got the big book. And let me be honest with you, I've not read the big book. I've read bits of it, the bits that are irrelevant to me, are important to me. But you can read this in its entirety. It's very readable. So I recommend that. So I say two books, but it's really one book. Okay. I'm now going to turn to the Q&A. Let's have a look at the questions here. Okay, this is from Rachel. Given there's clearly a growing demand for better representation in children's books and evidently a large untapped market, what do you think are the barriers that are stopping them translating into better representation? So what are the barriers? So Lucinda, do you want to kick off? Do you want to have a go at that? What are the barriers?
Yeah, I can think of 2 or 3. First of all is the idea people think that books with black characters, black writers don't sell. There's horrifying statistics again on a number of black writers in the UK. I think it's 2%. And there's a lot less support for black writers with their books. They'll get lower advances, they'll get less publishing campaigns from the big publishers. They're less likely to get picked up for second books and further book deals because the books don't sell because they're not pushed in the same way. So there's this constant uphill battle, particularly with the big publishers, for black writers and writers of colour to actually make it into sort of the mainstream. That's a big issue. And I think that's probably the main thing. It's all tied up in what people believe will and won't sell.
Sonya, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing. I think going back to what Sam said, you know, if you don't see them in the shop windows, or, you know, you don't, if it's not offered to you as a consumer, you can't choose to buy it. That's basically what it is.
Here's a question from an anonymous attendee, but he says, so far we've been, I'm assuming it's a he, could be a she, I don't know, but they make the point, so far we've been talking about black and brown children. But it goes on to make the point, but how important does the panel think it for white kids to see diversity in books so they can move through those sliding doors and experience a world which is very different to their own? Sam, do you want to go answer that one?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's essential. I think these multicultural books or diverse books, whichever terminology we're using, is interchangeable, but books essentially where black and brown people are the main characters in the story. I think they serve 2 purposes. I think they're very important for black and brown children to see themselves represented and to increase that level of engagement. So first of all, that's very important. But then they also serve another purpose, which is to validate the black experience for non-black children, so that when those non-black children, white children, pick up books and they see black people in the stories, that they are realizing that there is diversity in storytelling and in characterization. They themselves need to learn and be exposed to a range of cultures and a range of voices and a range of stories and a range of depictions. So it's very important for white children to see books with black children in them. It's very important.
Lucinda, you're nodding away there heavily, if you can nod heavily. Go on, I guess you got go ahead. Do you want to go continue, or the point?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what Sam was saying. Reading is one of the biggest ways of building empathy. And if people aren't given the idea that other people have experiences which are also valid, which are also worthy of stories, of being celebrated as heroes, of being seen as being important, then perhaps it doesn't play out in the real world as well. There's a lot of talk about whose lives matter. And obviously, we're all pretty confident here saying Black Lives Matter, and that doesn't mean white lives don't. But if you are trying to create a sense of a world where Black lives really do matter, that's a story you need to be giving white kids as well.
Good point. Sonya, you made a point about representation. There's another question, another one from our anonymous attendee. But I think, Sonya, I'll give it to you. It says, I was interested. Lots of the panel are concerned about better representation. It's just a trend. It's your point about the Black Lives Matter and places, positions in publishing companies. In so many spheres, we've seen slow but incremental progress towards better representation. What do you think that representation? Why do you think that representation in books and publishing is not likely to follow the same path? Meaning, do you think this is it's a fad right now. It's not sustainable. That it's going to kind of fizzle out and we'll go back to the old way, Sonya. Is that your view, or do you think things are going to get better through what's happening now with Black Lives Matter? Do you think it's going to get better, or we're going to go backwards?
It's very tricky. I'd like to be an optimist, but over the past 30 or 40 years, there have been lots of initiatives in publishing to try and make it more diverse, and they basically haven't worked. Whether it's going to work this time, it's very, very difficult to say. What I think is it won't work through initiatives by big publishing companies. I know that's not the only thing that's going to make it work, because that's been tried. That was tried in the 80s and the 90s and the noughties, and it didn't make the difference. So this time, I think we all as a society need to get on board with it and support booksellers like Sam, and support companies like mine and lots of other companies, smaller companies that are doing work in this area. That would make the difference.
Okay. Sam, do you want to come back?
I was just going to just expand on that point. So we've all referred to the 1% research that was done in the last couple of years. There was another bit of research done, the part 2 of that. So when everyone in publishing was in uproar in 2017 and 18 and making all of this noise about the 1%, we did it again the following year and more books were submitted. You'd have to look at those results. I think it improved by about another 2%. So I know that it's hard to maybe churn books out in any kind of volume over a 12-month period, but that's what we're going to be having to look at. We need to be looking at the stats every year, because the following year, there wasn't really that much change. So what's going to happen next year and the year after and the year after? So more research needs to be done every year. That's a commitment that we need. And I'm going to be slightly radical here. Radical to some, but actually not radical to others. But my background was TV. I worked in television, and these conversations around representation on and off screen have been happening in TV for years. And there is something called the Lenny Henry plan, where Lenny Henry got very involved and made a lot of noise, rightfully so, and made television really look at itself and look at what it was doing wrong. And do you know that they've re-looked at some of these statistics 10 years later and nothing's changed? In fact, it's gotten worse than it was 10 years ago in terms of representation behind the camera. So now we start to move into the whole idea around moralistic. What's moralistic? And can we rely on the goodwill of people to hire better and to commission more diverse books? No, we can't. So this is where the radical bit comes in. We need some form of penalty or affirmative action, accountability, which is what happened in television, where production companies were financially penalised if they did not meet the requirements that were demanded of them around more diverse hiring and more diverse productions being made. That same model needs to move to publishing, where commissioning editors are being held to account on a daily or a monthly or a yearly basis to say, you need to produce X amount of books every year with black or brown characters in them, or whatever we decide the criteria will be. And I know that people might say that's stifling creativity. People may argue, oh, then it's going to look like it's becoming tokenistic. And there's a whole other conversation to be had around that. And it's not simple. It is complicated, but we cannot rely on the goodwill of people to commission books that are so needed, because they just won't. They have to be held accountable, and money talks.
There's Rachel Bonington makes a point here. She says, is there an industrial body which could make a commitment to that regular analysis of the statistics on representation? Do you think that's practical?
I don't know, but I'm just sorry. Emma Bryant in the Q&A has just said it's not stifling creativity because it's not instead of, it's alongside. I don't understand what Emma means. It'd be really good if she could maybe write some more notes to expand, because the last thing I want to do is offend anyone in the chat. I don't know if I have offended Emma, but I feel really strongly about this subject, and I feel like what Sonya said, anyone who's been in publishing more than 10, 20, 30, 40 years will know that these are not new conversations. We've been having these, I wasn't around in publishing then, I've only just come into it, but Michael, like, you know, these are conversations that have been happening way before I was even born, and like, we're still having them. Like, something fundamental needs to change, and that's, I don't know what it is. We need to work out what it is and start implementing it, because there's so much talking, and whilst talking is good and it's therapeutic and it can be productive, it's not getting the results. It's a waste of energy. It's hot air. Okay.
There's a specific question here, and I'm going to address this to Lucinda because I don't know the answer to this. I know the answer. It says, what do you think of the Scholastic Voices series? Is that a controversial question?
I don't know if it's a controversial question. I think it's doing really good work at reinserting narratives of people of colour in British history, because that's what it does. Like, it takes amazing Black writers and writers of colour, and it gets them to write stories set in historical periods with Black, minority, Asian characters. And so when you look at a history and people go, oh, it's all whitewashed, there's nothing here. There weren't any Black people in Tudor times. Then you can actually look at Diver's Daughter by Patrice Lawrence and go, oh, hey, this is different. There were Black people in Tudor times, turns out. So I think it's really useful for that. I've not read all the books, and so I can't comment on all of them. But I know I really like Diver's Daughter.
So you think it's a good idea? So you think that the Scholastic Voice is a good idea then?
I think it's a good idea. I don't think it's going to solve the problem, but I think it's a good contribution. I am very cognizant of the fact we're 10 minutes early. Over.
I was thinking you're ahead of me now. I was going to say, you've got one last question. Go on, just very quickly. There's one last question, and it's on the Black curriculum. Does that feed into our dialogue? Is that important to what we're talking about in terms of Black books? Are they related, or is that a separate thing altogether? The academic curriculum shouldn't be related to to what books are published. Sonya, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, I think the primary curriculum is the one that I know the most about, because we publish books for children up to age 12. And from what I can see in the primary curriculum, there is opportunity for teachers to teach Black history if they want to. They're not compelled to, but they can if they want to. So, you know, they can teach Benin if they want to. It's an option for them for children aged 8, 9 and 10. And I think the feeling I get is that it's not chosen so often by teachers, and that's partly because the resources aren't there for them and they lack the confidence to do it. So this is where, you know, this is a gap I've tried to fill. But I think it is very important. And you know, the government has just recently said, no, we're not going to change the curriculum. But I think even though the government refused to change it in the way that it needs to be changed, I think teachers can still do good work.
So Sam, I'll let you have the last word on this then. The curriculum versus books. Are they the same, linked, or should we keep them separate?
I've got a very interesting relationship with the curriculum, and I wrestle with the curriculum every day. Do we go down the government route and force them to change the curriculum, or do we say, forget the curriculum, let's focus on another route, which is the reading for pleasure route, which you have more control over? And I'm not sure which is the better route to take towards change, and I'm always trying to work that out. But just echoing what Sonya said, teachers are in such a privileged position. They can teach whatever they want. I don't know why teachers have got it in their head that they have to stick with what is on the curriculum. at primary, I'm talking. They don't have to. It is a recommended guide. There are key points that they have to hit, but there is a lot of flexibility around it. So if they want to teach Benin, if they want to teach about Timbuktu, if they want to teach about ancient civilizations that are going back thousands of years in Africa, they are allowed. It is down to a few things why this isn't happening. Teacher confidence. Less than 10% of teachers, according to the National Education Union, self-identify as Black. White teachers are doing great jobs. I'm not saying that they're bad people. We need our teachers. I support the teachers. I work in schools all the time. But there's the lack of teacher confidence, and it's what they're being taught at college and university. If they've never heard about Benin, or they've never heard about Mansa Musa, or they've never heard about ancient African civilizations, how can they teach it? The system is completely flawed. The national curriculum needs to be ripped up, and we need to start again. That's exactly how I feel about it.
Not a radical response there. Look, what I'm going to say is, my takeaway from this, I'm trying to sum up here, the energy and the enthusiasm I got from the three of you, if that is your representative of what's happening in the business, in the marketplace, in children's books today, then we've got a great future, regardless of what this Black Lives Matter and representation. Your energy is just fantastic. I really appreciate it, honestly. So I've really enjoyed this session here. I'm sorry we've overrun, Lucinda, but I want to say, I'll hand back to you and say, thank you for allowing me to be part of this great day. Thank you so much.